Right, I thought I'd have a little chat about the elephant in the room as regards this Delta Wolf. One of the main, I suppose, topics that keeps coming up on the Facebook forums, my YouTube channel, and others about this particular rifle. Not just this one either. There's a select band of air rifles that all seem to draw the same criticism, and the three that I've owned, where that seems to come in for the same amount of flack, is this Delta Wolf, my Steyr Pro X Scout, and the Leshy 2 that I own. And basically, everyone always moans about the price. It's always like, oh, way too expensive. We're getting fleeced. We're getting ripped off. The companies are taking the mickey out of their customers. Blah de blah de blah de blah. On it goes. So I thought I'd have a little look and see, a little probe into that and see whether there's any truth behind that. Are we indeed getting ripped off by Daystate with the price of this rifle? And the conclusions I've come to, I'll tell you straight from the start, I don't think we are, and I'll explain why. Right, if you look at most air rifles that come out as supposedly new air rifles, that companies announce we've got a new air rifle, it's coming out, brand new air gun, blah de blah de blah, big fanfare, everyone goes nuts, brand new air rifle. And if you look at 99.9% of these supposed new air rifles that are coming out, they're not new air rifles by any means. What they are is an old, tried and tested design that they've had around in their books for years and years. It's been in their catalogue for years. And what they've done, they've slightly reconfigured it. So it's got a new laminate stock. It might have a new synthetic stock. It might have a new thumbhole stock. But the action's the same, barrel's the same, cylinders the same, triggers the same, valving's all the same, everything, magazines, the same, right? So all they've done, change the stock. And then you get others where they go, oh, bro, this new bullpup, brand new bullpup, brand new, brilliant bullpup, blah, 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 blah. And when you look at it, it's the same thing. It's the same action, same cylinder or buddy bottle, same trigger and all the rest of it. All it's done, they've put it in reconfigured it to be a bullpup. Now, admittedly, that involves some design work and whatnot, obviously, because you've got to alter the trigger linkage if you've got a standard rifle block, you need to alter the trigger linkage so you can do it with the on a bullpup. And obviously it'll need a new stock as well. So there's design work there in doing that. And then others, like they say, oh, brought out this new one, it's the new carbine version, and all it is, same gun, short barrel, a short cylinder, or they put a little tiny carbon fibre buddy bottle on it. So you've only got to look at something like the Airgun World Buyer's Guide. And if you flick through it, you'll see a vast number of basically the same rifle, reconfigured in all sorts of different ways. So if you look at the air arms, by the way, I'm not having a go at any of these companies that do this, because all of them do it. But if you look at air arms, there's a whole series of rifles: HFT 500, the S400, S400 Sporter, TDR Tactical, 510 XS, S410 Carbine, S410 Superlight, 500 XS, 510 Carbine, 510 TC, and they're not alone. BSA do it as well. They've got if you go to the BSA ones, you've got the R10 thing. There's loads of them. R10 standard, R10 Super Carbine, R10 thumbhole standard length, R10 thumbhole Super Carbine, the Scorpion. They all use the same actions, same bottles, slightly reconfigured, same triggers, all just slightly reconfigured. And you go all the way through it. Hatsan, there's loads of them. Hatsan, Kral, the Puncher series. The Puncher action's used on a whole host of rifles. And not to mention the fact that it's also used on a lot of Webley rifles as well. So like the Raider series, the Mastiff, all the new Enforcer thing, all basically utilise the same Kral block, cylinder, trigger. And there's a reason for that, and the reason is that development costs are staggeringly high these days. Even minor changes will cost an absolute fortune. I'm talking hundreds of thousands of pounds to make the slightest little change. You think you've got to get someone to design it, someone to do all the drawings, someone to make the prototype, mock-ups, then someone to make a functioning prototype, and then if you decide to go, then it might need some modifications, some tweaks here and there. Then it goes to someone, an engineer that's got to take the prototype stage and develop it so it can go into mass production. Then you've got to set up all your machinery to mass produce it. It costs hundreds and hundreds of thousands to make the smallest of changes, which is why most of these big airgun companies tend to just modify what they've already got. It's the cheaper option, right? Now, I'm not saying it's cheap, but it's the cheaper option than designing something from the ground up. So if you've got a block that you know is tried and trusted, or a trigger that you know is tried and trusted, there's always that urge from the money point of view to utilise that in your new design, right? And 99% of new air rifles are that. And a classic example is the little PR9000 series of Chinese air rifle. That little cheap Chinese air rifle that costs under 200 quid. I've owned one, had it for ages. Brilliant little thing, got it from SMK PR9000. That appears in so many forms. It's constantly being touted around as a new rifle from this company or that company. And it isn't. All they've done is they've got a PR9000, put a little big plastic bit on a bolt or something, or stuck it in a plastic stock with bits that drop off it, or stuck it in a wooden stock with a big plastic bit on the front, or kitted it out with a bipod or whatever. But it's the same. That rifle is in countless of the lower end rifles. The basic chassis, air cylinder and barrel of that little cheap air rifle appears in so many guns that come out as supposedly new. Right, so what happens then when a company decides, no, we're going to design something completely new, we're going to go mad, we're going to forget costs and the accountants whinging at us, we're going to design something from the ground up and it's going to be brand spanking new, completely like we've never made before. We've got nothing in our catalogue that's similar. And that's what happened basically with the Delta Wolf. The chassis is totally new. The whole chassis, all of that is new. Not seen on any other Daystate. The electronics, whilst Daystate have obviously been making electronic rifles for some time, and they've got the Pulsar and the Red Wolf, the electronic system in this is completely and utterly different. Don't think just because it's electronic it's the same one, because it isn't. For starters, it's touchscreen, it's got a whole host of different functions, and it is configured totally differently. So all that electronic programming, electronic circuitry and boarding, valve releasing, all the rest of it is all brand new, and it's all had to be designed by electrical engineers and made, as I say, through test stages, then an engineer bringing it into a production stage, and then gearing everything up to produce them. Similarly, everything else. The only parts that you could possibly say that Daystate raided the existing tool bin on this rifle are, obviously it's got a standard AR-15 grip that is off the shelf from innumerable companies. And I think the trigger is possibly the same trigger that they used on the Red Wolf and the Pulsar and even the Renegade. I could be wrong, but I think it's the same one. Certainly the trigger shoe and the shaft and everything is the same. And I suspect it's the same electronic trigger unit that's come off that. And the other thing is the cocking bolt looks very similar to the new XR series of Brococks, which obviously is part of the sort of Daystate umbrella. Now, I might have got it wrong. This might come first, and then they've utilised that on the Brococks, but it does look very similar. But apart from that, oh, and a stock carbon fibre air cylinder, but these there's companies that specialise in making these air cylinders, and they buy them off that. All air rifle companies do the same thing. They all buy the carbon bolts in. But the actual rifle itself, the barrel, even the shroud, bigger diameter than they've ever used before, so someone's had to design that, had to tool up to manufacture it. It's made out of carbon fibre, so it's not going to be cheap to start with. So all of that's new. 20mm end cap, threading that, deciding to go with 20mm, all needs designing. I know it sounds simple, or we'll go to a 20mm, but it doesn't. It all got to be drawn up, designed, tested, tooling costs to make it. Chronograph in the front, that is not a stock item. That's not come off the shelf from anything else. That chronograph's been designed from the ground up to fit in the barrel of this rifle. Now, you've got manufacturers that spend a fortune designing a chronograph and hoping that they're going to sell that as a standalone item and shift thousands and thousands of units to recoup their costs. This is a chronograph that's been designed specifically for this rifle. So you're only going to recoup your costs on that when you sell a rifle, right? So again, another expensive electronic development that's cost a fortune. And it goes on, the valving, all new valving, the inbuilt plenum thing that all runs inside of here, all new. The way that it activates and turns itself on, all new. All the programming, all new. All the accessory stuff that's been designed for it, all only suitable for this rifle. All of that takes time to develop and use. So basically what you've got here, you've got something that's never before been seen. And the other rifles that I mentioned, the Steyr Pro X, again, Steyr took a flyer on that. I mean, all right, the Hunting 5 auto action was used on their little target pistol, the 5-shot LP 550, I think it was, target pistol. That had the same stick mag self-indexing action as the Hunting 5 auto. So they saved a bit of money there by putting it on a rifle. But the Pro X is a standalone thing. It doesn't use the same block and it doesn't use the same magazine. It's got a rotary spring-acted magazine that's cocked slightly differently, and it's also got a different custom-built trigger that's only fitted to the Pro X because it's not adjustable. So it's a unit they've designed specially for that rifle, and the whole thing basically is a design from the ground up. They have utilised the barrels and the air cylinders off the H5A because you get the Scout version and the full-size version, like you get the Scout version and the full-size version H5A. But again, not something they had on the shelf. So they didn't have a Pro X rifle and they've just shoved it in a Pro X bullpup configuration. It's been designed from the ground up. And again, development costs, tooling costs, all the rest of it costs a fortune, and I mean a fortune. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds probably ploughed into developing these guns. And it's not a massive market, let's be honest. So that is why that gun also is extraordinarily expensive. And the Leshy 2, another one that was designed from the ground up, doesn't share any common parts really with the other guns. The Leshy 1 doesn't share any common parts really with that. A ground up development. And again, very expensive, very expensive. And the other thing is between the Leshy 2 and this, both of them, because they're so cutting edge, and they are cutting edge, they have pushed them boundaries out a bit with both these rifles. There's no other gun I know of got all the electronic capability of this rifle and an inbuilt chronograph as well. In the unit, there just isn't. There's nothing else out there like it. And likewise, Leshy 2, little folding semi-auto, or self-indexing rather. Nothing else out there like that either. And they have a few little teething problems when they bring these to market. Thankfully, with this, you get 3-year guarantee, 3-year warranty. So it doesn't really matter because, all right, it's inconvenient if something goes wrong with it and you're sending it away and you're getting it fixed and it's coming back. Well, in all fairness, they're pretty quick. But the thing is, you're getting something that's cutting edge. It's not a rehash of something else. It's a cutting edge, brand new from the ground up design that you see in it. right? It's not just the same action in a different thing. Weyrauch were renowned for it. When Weyrauch designed something, they design something about every million years, and they keep it on their books for an equally long period of time. And they're very good at what they do because they designed the 100 and the 110, both fantastic rifles, dead reliable. And all they do is they'll just rehash those around different actions: thumb hole, FSB, fully shrouded barrel, carbine. Now they've got bullpups, etc., etc. Totally utilising that chassis to its utmost to get as much of those development costs back as quickly as they can by making that action into a whole host of different styles. Daystate can't do that with this. This is what it is. It's a Delta Wolf. You know, you can't really, without completely redesigning it, I wouldn't have thought that you could really alter this to be anything else other than a Delta Wolf. So really, they've thrown all their eggs in one basket with this. It is what it is. And I would imagine that Daystate, even at the price they're charging, Daystate are going to struggle to make any money on these rifles, if they make any money at all. Now you may say, well, that's nonsense, because who the hell makes something that they're not going to make any money on? Well, I'll tell you what, one of the most famous ones, a company that made something that they actually lost hundreds of thousands of pounds on every one they sold, and that was the Bugatti Veyron. The VW group decided to make it as an engineer's experiment, gave them free range to do whatever they want, and even at over £1 million a piece, they still lose hundreds of thousands of pounds on that car when they sell. Every one they sell, they lose a fortune. Why did they do it? Because it shows what the VW group as a whole is capable of, what their engineers can do, how advanced their thinking is, stuff like that. And eventually, the things that you see on the Veyron will, or some of the bits, some of that engineering expertise, even if it's only little things like carburetor controls or injector controls, or the way the brake servos work and stuff like that, that'll filter down into the other cars in the VW group. But for every Veyron they sell, they lose hundreds of thousands of pounds. So it's not uncommon for a company to make something that is like a flagship, if you like, something that shows what they can do without necessarily hoping to recoup all their costs. Because what they'll do is the technology that they come out with will eventually filter through into the lower end, cheaper rifles, where they will make their money. So when you see this and you think, and everyone says, oh, it's a rip-off, they're taking their mickey out of their customers. They're sat there making a big fat 1,500 quid on every rifle. They're not. I don't think they are. I know a little bit about bringing, design and stuff. I work in engineering companies and whatnot, and it costs a staggering amount of money to bring something new and high tech to market. And I bet they struggle to make anything on this rifle. Certainly short term. I would imagine that you're looking at decades before this rifle recoups what it's cost to design, let alone make a profit on every one. It's a technological showcase for Daystate, I think. A sort of fanfare of this is what we can do, this is what we're about. This rifle here, we've pushed the boat out, design it from new, bang, have that. And then eventually little bits of what this can do will probably filter down, like I say, into different rifles that they bring out in the future that will obviously, because they've spent all that money developing this system and making this rifle what it is, you might see little bits and pieces coming in on all the guns. So like perhaps the chronograph, they've already spent a fortune designing it and developing it, so they might stick it in, I don't know, at some stage, or they might stick it in the Red Wolf. I don't know, but they might do. Or the touchscreen, you might design a Red Wolf with a touchscreen in it. Who knows? So, are they ripping you off? No. Is it dead expensive? Yeah, of course it is. Because you're paying for something that's been designed and built from the ground up. Like the Steyr Pro X Scout and like the Lesher 2. They're not rehashes of something else. And if you don't believe me about how much they're rehashed, get that and have a look through it. And have a look at how many rifles in here share the same action. You know, there's dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of them that all share the same action, because they're not bringing out new guns, they're not redesigning something from the floor up, they're getting something that they've already got that they know works, and they're just rehashing it. And which is why they end up sort of saying, oh, you know, our guns are dead reliable. Of course they're dead reliable. If you've been making something for 40, 50 years and making the same thing, all them mistakes and errors and problems that were at the initial stages when they were first launched should have been well ironed out by now. So they're going to be reliable because you've got something that's been around forever. But is it cutting edge? Is it really new? Maybe it isn't. So there you go. So don't be too quick to bemoan the price. And the other thing to remember is it really that expensive? Yes, it is. But if you're a shooter, if you're a shotgunner, you know, the cost of this rifle will buy you a fairly good shotgun. A fairly good shotgun. You're looking at double the price to buy a good one. And even more, the sky's the limit for them. You know, 10, 15 grand on a shotgun. Not uncommon at all. And that's just for 2 tubes and an action that fires 2 pins. So when you think of the complexity involved in this, it kind of brings things into reality a bit, you know, sort of brings home, you know, that it's not really that expensive. And as a sport, you know, this is probably up there with the top end of what's currently available. You know, it's like a top end set of golf clubs, which will probably cost you twice what this bloody thing costs, with a fancy electric trolley bag and all the rest of it, and a leather bag and all the top carbon fibre woods and all that sort of malarkey. So it's not that expensive. You need to get some sort of perspective on things. Yes, it is expensive for an airgun, but that's only because we've become used to paying so little for airguns, or comparatively little for airguns. But if you're a shotgunner, you know, you'd probably look back and look at what everyone moaning about how dear these are and think, flipping it, you're having a laugh. You try buying a Beretta, a Browning, or any of those, a Miraku, or any of those shotguns, you know, other than entry level ones. Right, thanks for watching.